Hello, everybody. Thank you again for taking time out of your day to listen in on our narrative listening party today. This will be co-hosted by myself as well as the founders for CFAP, the Council of Young Filipino American Physicians, held by Dr. Angelico Ico Razon and Dr. Antonio Moya. So thank you so much again for taking time today. We really appreciate you guys getting interested in our efforts. And this is really the first big part of it, is to kind of congregate everyone together in listening to our narratives. So again, mabuhay, welcome. Just a brief outline. This is a little bit rough, but we'll start off with welcome and introductions. And then I'll also go over some ground rules. Then we'll have our co-founders speak on the CFAP story, and then followed by some additional notes by myself. And then we'll leave the second half hour open to the public for anyone that wishes to share some thoughts. I will describe a little bit more in detail at the ground rules how to navigate if you wish to speak during that time. So the CFAP is the mission of CFAP, the Council of Young Filipino American Physicians, is to promote a professional and social platform for the leadership development of young Filipino American physicians and trainees, promote the educational pipeline, and partner with the Filipino American community to eliminate health disparities. CFAP aims to embolden leaders to amplify the voice of our members, patients, and community. Regarding the details of the actual conference, the first annual CFAP conference will tentatively take place on October 2020. The vision is that through this annual conference, we hope to bring together and inspire both Filipino American physicians and trainees, that includes pre-medical all the way through fellow physicians around the country, to make lasting, fruitful relationships with each other and advance change in every sector of the healthcare field with our collective strength. The goals of the conference revolve around mentorship, research, and networking. Just a few words on our planning committee. So we have some amazing people that have been involved in the planning process so far, and they represent people from all different stages of the medical pipeline, from the pre-medical stage all the way through fellows and attending physicians. It's comprised of a conference coordinator, that's myself, as well as 8 committees, which is comprised of 14 members across 3 states. We have workshop, publicity, logistics, research, exhibition, social, program, as well as engagement. The reason we're having this narrative listening party is to really navigate and guide the direction of our planning efforts. This is not only for our planning committee, but also for those that are interested in just hearing more about our stories, and also if any stories resonate with you, we'd love to also share those as well in this listening party. Just a couple of ground rules before we start with our presenters. So as just a friendly reminder to please mute yourself upon joining, and also to ensure you're muted when others are speaking. 2, please be considerate of other people and their time when speaking. 25 to 30 minutes is not a lot of time for the number of people joining, so just be mindful of that. But of course, everyone's thoughts are just as important. And then 3, if you do wish to participate and say a couple of words at the end of the presentations, please send a message in the Zoom chat bar. That means go down to more, which is next to share screen on the bottom of the screen, then go to chat, and then state that you wish to speak after the presentations. You can also choose to message me individually on that chat for privacy. And then we would start in the order that the messages are sent to me. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our co-presenters.
Great, thank you so much, Robbie. Can everyone hear me? Robbie, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect, all right. Hi everyone, my name is Antonio. So I'm gonna be telling us the CYFAP story, the Council of Young Filipinx American Physicians, really this is a culmination of a lot of people thinking about this, but we've kind of had a critical mass to start this going. So next slide, Robbie. If you all could put your audio on mute, I hear a little bit of squeaking in the background. All right, so this is me. I'm a neurologist. I am in Los Angeles, and my areas of research are on Filipino-American stroke disparities and teleneurology. And Angelico, who will also be presenting, it's the next slide. Next slide, Robbie. Is over here. He is a pediatrician and internist who works, his research is on adolescents and young adults with special needs and chronic illnesses. All right, so just a little bit about my story. So this is my family back in the 1950s, actually. That's my Lola, and I'm not born, obviously, at this time, but my dad is the little boy being held by my grandmother. And if you go to the next slide, you could see my grandmother. That's her, very beautiful, 1950. Keep on going, Robbie. 1985. So that's me, actually, in the stroller. You can see that my dad and my grandma are actually holding ice cream, and they are overweight. And this was kind of a problem that we had when we immigrated from the Philippines to the US. We kind of associated having more weight as being healthier. Next slide. So unfortunately, you keep on going, my grandmother in 2001 had a stroke, and that was in Zambales. This happened while I was an undergrad at UCLA, and I did not know what a stroke was. I didn't know what the repercussions was. So I spent the whole time in college really trying to find out, why is this happening in our community? What happened with my grandmother was a story that I had heard so often with other Filipino-American students at UCLA. And I wanted to get down to understanding why this was happening in our Filipino-American community. I thought one of the best ways was actually to go back to the Philippines. I did a Fulbright fellowship that was back in 2009. If you click it one more, Robbie. And that's where I explored stroke centers in the Philippines. Living in the Philippines for a year really helped reveal kind of how much of a linkage we have to the Philippines, the motherland, and kind of our health behaviors here as a Filipino community. So I was very fortunate. I got into medical school at UCSF. If you click it again, Robbie, 2010. And if you keep on clicking, you'll see pictures. I know some of you are here from UC Davis. That's Voltaire, who's your current, I guess, leader at UC Davis. But I was surrounded by amazing mentors and actually co-medical students who really inspired me to look more at what's happening with our community. So you can see Voltaire Sinigayan. He's attending at UC Davis, who heads the FAHC group as a faculty mentor. But in the middle, you can see Angelica Rozon and Ryan Huerto, who is a UC San Diego prime student at that time. And then the other pictures you could see here for all those on phone. Gavin Newsom was there for our inaugural opening of the Mabuhay Health Center in 2010. And again, this was a culmination of us partnering with the Filipino community of San Francisco. We learned that, a lot of the veterans wanted to have providers who understood Filipino culture and could speak the language to serve them. So this shaped, if you keep on going, Robbie, this shaped the future when I did my MPH at Harvard. Actually, my mentor, who's also on this phone call, Dr. Leo Selly, is here at the bottom left side. And again, I met an amazing community of Filipinos, not only from the US, but from the Philippines, who were there learning about public health issues and taking that public health lens into our practice in medicine. this is the time that actually I met Angelico Razon, who's going to be the co-presenter, and he was truly an inspiration throughout this whole time to really bring community at the forefront. So if you click it one more time, Robbie, this is back in 2013. And then just chugging forward, there was a lot of uncertainty about residency and insecurity, and we can talk more about that when we share more of our stories, but I was very happy. I got into my residency in neurology at New York Presbyterian at Cornell specifically. And I was so lucky to meet Dr. Tessa Del Carmen, who is a geriatrician, Filipino also. We were the only Filipinos, there was 3 of us actually in the whole university medical school who were Filipino. And I latched on to her as my mentor and asked her also, just with like Leo Selly, on how could I build a career in neurology and Filipino-American health disparities? And how do we connect that back to the Philippines, which is where our families came from? Luckily, after this neurology residency, which was super tough in New York, I had the opportunity to come back to UCLA through this fellowship. It's the National Clinician Scholars Program. That was in 2018, where, again, I was reunited with Angelico Razon. We just are at different sites. He is at the Penn site on the East Coast, and I'm at UCLA. And the beautiful thing about this fellowship, if you keep on going, Robbie, was that I was able to take, oh, actually, before I go into that, keep on going, Robbie. So me and Angelico reunited, but we also met an amazing doctor, Dr. Ramel Rivera, who is the president and head of the Association of Philippine Physicians of America. He's based in Philadelphia. And we said to him, is there any organization that unites all of the Filipino physicians in the United States? And he said, yeah, in fact, there is. We're having our annual conference here in October, or September 29th to October 2, 2019. And before that even happened, Angelico and I had created a nationwide survey to really get a finger on the pulse of what we as young Filipino-American doctors want in uniting and making a national organization. So Robbie talked about the mission and the vision of CYFAP. Really, that was created through the responses of about 200 plus respondents, Filipino-American, all the way from college to attendings, talking about what they would want if we were all to unite. So this is a picture of all of us. Ryan Huerta is also in this picture because he's also a National Clinician Scholar. He's at the University of Michigan. So next slide. So here's a picture of our survey. I just wanted to show you kind of the screenshot, really asking all of you who are on this call, and I'm so happy so many of you are on this call, about what is it that you would want to see in a national organization that unites all young Filipino-American doctors. So if you click on the next slide, Robbie, this is where I want you all to take out your phones if you're on video. We have a QR code. If you scan this with your camera, usually like a smartphone, will be able to pull up a QR code application. It will bring you to our survey, and we would love to hear your thoughts. If you've already completed the survey, don't worry about filling it out again, but really this is how we've been trying to find out everything that's been happening in the Filipinx community in medicine, all the way from Hawaii, all the way to New York. So I'll give a few seconds just so that everyone can scan that code. If not, there's going to be a video of this available, and we'll also send the link. In fact, Angelico or Robbie, if you have the link available, or I think Iko, if you have the link available, you could put it in the chat. So I'll leave it for a few more seconds. All right, everyone got it? Awesome. Okay, so next slide. So for me here in Los Angeles, so many of us are here. We actually have the biggest Filipino community out in outside of the Philippines. I was able to connect with this group called FASG, Filipino American Service Group Incorporated. And the community wanted to talk about these health problems. What is a stroke? What is mental health? Like, how can we improve this in our local Los Angeles community? And that's when I got to reunite also with Robbie, who's hosting this conference, this call. And Robbie has such a connection to the medical students and the undergrad, so we decided to join forces and create something big together with all of you. So next slide. And we have other people, as you can see, there's so many of us, we just don't know about each other. So Bernie Lim, I don't know if she's on the call, but we did the PhilPro experience together. Also, we have Dr. Melissa Palma, who's on this call as well. So I call this kind of the Kayumangi wave. This is like the brown wave of young Filipino-American doctors and people aspiring to be doctors. We have so much power in uniting. And you can see we have the Mary Khan and Lemuel also. There's just so many of us. So if you keep on going, Robbie. Next slide. So it always comes back to, why are we doing this? So I really want this to be, I know my reason why is because I feel such a connection to the Filipino community, both in the Philippines and here. And if we're not going to represent ourselves, then who will? Especially the health needs of our patients and also our community. So I always think of this framework, thinking about the why before proceeding forward. So next slide, Robbie. And really, this is also what it's about for me too. Our Filipino community is the, I guess, most established Asian Pacific Islander community here in the United States. We've served during World War II. My Lola was a veteran in World War II. We have such a connection to the United States, yet I feel like our voice is not being heard and our community's voice is not being heard. So it's about time that all of us get together and really see what can we as young Filipino-American physicians do and say to help our communities. The Jollibee was just to represent the fact that our diet is not necessarily the best, which is something that we could talk about improving as a group. Okay, so next slide. And so I think of two keywords, mapaglikha, resourcefulness, like thinking of these rice terraces that have been around for more than 2,000 years, the Banaue rice terraces, and bayanihan, this community spirit that all of us can bring together in really uniting as a group, and CYFAP within this Association of Philippine Physicians in America. So many of us have lived parallel existences in different states throughout the United States, and it's just beautiful to see that 45, participants being able to share this kind of story. This is just my story, but I would love to hear everyone else's story as well. So Iko Razon, Dr. Razon is going to be next up here.
So maraming salamat, Antonio, and thank you everyone who is joining us today to kind of not only hear kind of our stories, but also to share your own. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from all of you. But I guess I want to start off by telling a story about stories, because storytelling is such an important part of Filipino culture. We call it kwentuhan. In school, we learn, or at least in the States, we learn that stories often have a beginning, middle, or end. But the exception to that might be stories about the Philippines that we're told by our parents, which kind of always seemed, to me at least, they always went around in circles. And one of those stories that I was told as a child was even before I could even remember, when I was in the Philippines. I used to enjoy lazy carabao rides while wading through lush rice paddies. Or maybe it was coconut trees. Once it was a mango grove. And although the story was a little different each time, it always left this kind of dreamy impression of this idyllic paradise. It was like one of those, those Technicolor paintings by Amor Solo of young Filipinexes in Maria Clara, happily tilling a field or dancing tinikling in a verdant countryside, or as Antonio mentioned, hoisting a building on their backs. But these retellings felt so contradictory to the other narrative that my parents were telling me. the one where they came to the United States during a time of political upheaval and unrest to seek better opportunities for their young family. Why leave a tropical cornucopia just to face uncertainty, estrangement, and xenophobia? It was as if we were cast out of Eden. Fortunately, as I grew up, we found ties to a tightly knit Filipino community, many of whom who shared this like paradoxical experience. And for me, don't go ahead yet. and for me, uh, this is what it meant to be Filipino American, to embrace this duality of the trans-Pacific drama that has not always been a part of my reality, but really as a part of the collective reality of shared lived experiences, that's really a part of the American story. And so stories are like a really important part in medicine, right? We rely on gathering stories from our parents, or from our patients, and in turn, they expect us to explain disease as a story about the body and the mind. And in my community work, storytelling often comes up as an effective tool for advocacy. Next slide. So I love stories. You can imagine how excited I was to attend a 3-day workshop on storytelling for social change when I was getting my master's of public health at Harvard. In a nutshell, that workshop was exactly how not to hold a community workshop, especially one that was full of first-generation students. The icebreaker was, what do your parents do for a living? Kind of awkward. When discussing ground rules, the facilitator demanded that we arrive 10 minutes early for each session. Now, I wasn't just being a Filipino and pointing out that many people might have to come late, but in reality, many people had to travel across town and had jobs. She dismissed my comment as a sign of a lack of commitment. She often overlooked women of color who raised their hands to speak, while men were often rewarded when they interrupted the speaker. And quite simply, her examples of storytelling were just, I don't know how to say, just revealed her privileged upbringing. And I've never seen so many people feel so alienated, so alienated and excluded. And to be honest, many people even cried. And yet, this was just like another day at Harvard, the belly of the academic beast. And for some reason, I decided to go there twice. Once for college and again for graduate school. The first time I applied was on a whim. It was an extra checkbox on the Common App. The only other film I knew who even went to college was Ate Grace. Not my actual Ate, but I called her Ate. And she had a generous scholarship to Georgetown. So I followed her cues through the application and financial aid process, like through and through. Because otherwise, I sort of had to navigate and finance my own education without much else. And to my dismay, when Ate Grace came back for the first time for winter break, she had one less finger. She lost it to frostbite. It felt like the lesson here was that the Pinoy should not stray far from the mango tree. But my applications were already in. Ultimately, I got in, and when Harvard gave me the most generous financial aid, I kind of had a bit of a dilemma in my hands. I looked to my predecessors for inspirations of resilience. My Malay ancestors who braved the seas on balangays, generations of Kababayans who resisted several imperial powers, and my parents who moved to this country amid political and financial uncertainty. I packed up my coat, which by the way was paid by a special scholarship fund for Californians, and moved to Cambridge. Next slide. And as you can imagine, my first 2 years were really tough. I was woefully unprepared academically and socially, and I struggled with confidence issues. I found myself in another contradiction. Forever labeled as an Ivy Leaguer, but didn't really fit in my new social caste. I didn't spend my summers on a yacht. I didn't share an apellido with the buildings that I studied and lived in. And I did not have a large peer network from boarding school. But nevertheless, I slowly discovered others who would understand and shared I lived duality, and I built a network. Next slide. And I found others, many kayumangi and many more not, who shared my passion for public service and taught me the value of exploring these shared experiences. I found myself working with low-income youth in Boston's Chinatown, another diasporic community. And yes, as you can see here, my Malay features kind of sort of stick out, but as cliche as it sounds, I found a new community with the people I served and my fellow volunteers. I've been debating whether or not to see if I still remember a little bit of Cantonese. which means I don't speak any Cantonese. And through my organizing work, I learned that youth, but really all people, need mentors who look like them and mentors who don't look like them, but who nevertheless take the time to listen to their story. To sum up my first Harvard foray, I didn't find the passion for biomolecular mechanism of cancer in a chemistry lab, which by the way is important. You should still keep up with it. I still enjoy it. But really what I found was a calling to address social determinants of health in a community center on Parcel 24 in Boston. So, when I went to public health school, I thought it was prepared for my second round of Harvard. I was more sure of my identity and my talents. I even came with a group of fellow primates, also spending their master's year at Harvard. But nevertheless, I found myself sitting in a workshop in a Harvard classroom, this time as a graduate student, like feeling excluded yet again. Next slide. Several weeks after that workshop, I overheard someone muttering Tagalog during a break in one of those large lecture hall classes. No way. I rushed over, and this is basically how I met Antonio, being like your classic Filipino social butterfly, smiling, enthusiastic, and talking to other Filipinexes. Antonio, what were you babbling about again? Something about lumangoy, padyak, tumakbo, something like that, something really sportsy. But from then on, we'd bond over a lot of shared experiences. I think I finally convinced him to be my friend when I made Langka ice cream, which is illustrated here. Apparently he took a picture of me doing it. I didn't even realize until I found it on Facebook today. And then again, when I gave him ube halaya, on both accounts, he ate all of it in one sitting. Next slide. I certainly have tons of positive Filipinx themed like Harvard stories to share, like how I spilled adobo and condensada on all the flags at International Day, how I got to meet Lawrence Fishburne, Selma Hayek, and Jada Pinkett Smith while dancing tinikling, and how I got to apply my community organizing skills when I led public health leadership workshops for inner city youth in my mom's hometown of Cebu. But most of my experiences with Antonio are sort of mundane, to be honest. We're just doing everyday, like, normal things. You can ask him what those were. My most memorable experience with Antonio was actually years later when we were both in residency. So you see, after medical school in California, actually, next slide, Robbie. And by the way, med school was a blast. I was surrounded by an active Filipinx community, a service-oriented community, and I went to the beach every weekend. It was awesome. Next slide. Anyways, after med school, Antonio and I went to our respective adventures out of state. I was at Michigan and him in New York for residency. Fortunately, I was a lot more equipped to deal with stresses of not just being an around-the-clock clinician, but also with assuming the identity as a physician and a fill-in physician, no less. But our fourth year was like really tough for trainees. There were a string of resident suicides, a couple of them in New York, and actually one of them in Michigan. One day, I had just about had it with residency. I had my credentials and my origins constantly questioned by my patients and colleagues alike. So after clinic, I ended up talking to Antonio for like an hour instead of just going home. It was snowing anyway, just another April in Michigan. And we mutually calmed each other down and encouraged each other to look forward to the next phase of our journeys. And I realized then one of the ways of not burning out was helping others not feel alone. You see, one of the goals of medical training is to find mentors that will shape how you practice medicine. And when you have an interest like cardiology or oncology, it can happen more organically as you rotate through those services and forge those relationships. And I've been very grateful that I have had many excellent general med peds like clinical mentors. But for interests outside of strictly clinical practice, like social determinants, community engagement, and figuring out how to adopt this new professional identity, those mentorship relationships can be harder to find. They do exist, but you might have to go outside of the traditional curriculum to find them through peers, conferences, research, community service. And in some cases, you might have to create them. Next slide. Oh, I did learn one thing from that storytelling workshop, actually. So stories aren't just about the arc of a beginning, a middle, and end. More importantly, they say a lot about the storyteller's values. And after all of this, I realized the point of all of those circuitous, like Filipino fables. They reinforce principles like kapwa, bayanihan, pakikisama. And I've been fortunate enough that I've had the time and fellowship to reflect and negotiate these Filipino values. not just on with by myself, but with a lot of other really amazing Phil-Am physicians who share these experiences, these lived experiences and values. And not just as a physician, but as a public health advocate and as a community member. And I'm slowly finding out like what that story about the Lisa Caravel was actually about. Next slide. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone else. Like, what stories do you have to share?
Thanks so much again, Iko, for sharing. And we're going to go ahead and switch now to my presentation. So if you pardon me. All right. So what CFAP and FAME mean to me. This is just about me briefly. So I went to Stanford for undergrad, went to UCLA for my master's in public health, and I'm finishing up my last year at UC Irvine in the Primal C program. That's a program in medical education for the Latino community. I'm very grateful and blessed to be where I'm at. I'm entering my 4th year, as I said, applying for pediatric residencies, and my interests lie in LGBTQ youth and health. HIV, STI prevention, Latinx and Filipinx communities and disparities, and diversity, equity, and inclusion and medical education. So take a moment. Have you ever taken a moment just to look at yourself and wonder how you got there? I was born in the central coast of California from a small town called Santa Maria, a place with a very small Filipino community and a thriving strawberry industry. I was the grandson of a farm worker and a child of immigrants. My dad was born in Quezon City and my mother in Isabela. In high school, I was one of 3 Filipino Americans in my entire class. That was it. However, when I moved to the Bay Area for college, I was shocked to see tons of Filipinos my age who understood the joys of having Jollibee, of eating Spam with rice for breakfast, of singing Magic Mike karaoke, of meeting people like me who, couldn't speak Tagalog entering college. I only knew essential phrases like, "Kain na," time to eat, or "You want palo?" to get spanked. These people were from an organization called PASU, or the Filipino American Student Union. Before I knew it, these new friends of mine whisked me away and taught me cool dances I'd never seen before, with coconuts, bamboo sticks, and benches. I was very confused. I had just met these people, yet they were so welcoming and friendly to me. They already knew my name and even knew what dorm I was in. I asked myself, how did I get here? Oddly enough, despite being in a new, unfamiliar place away from home, I found something familiar and clung to it. Taking an immunology class and becoming involved in a pediatric allergy lab made me curious about a career in medicine. However, the pre-med path was anything but familiar to me. Science GPA, research, and MCAT, oh my. It was a hot mess. I was not sure what I was doing. I had pre-med friends, but none of us had gone through the process. And then one day, almost 10 years ago, one of my closest college friends introduced me to her cousin, a medical student at UC San Francisco, one of the top medical schools in the nation. And what's more, he was in the program in medical education, or PRIME program, specifically for the urban underserved community. When we met, I was honestly taken a bit aback. This guy could have been my brother, older by barely a few years. I heard certain buzzwords which hit home: music, tinikling, chicken adobo. It all rang very familiar to me. And yet, certain things stood out as a bit different. He was confident and sincere in his actions. And it felt like he knew so much, not just about medicine, but about the world and what he wanted to achieve in life. I barely met this guy, yet I knew I wanted to be just like him. And just like my friends from college, he immediately made me feel welcome and supported. The first thing he did was connect me to an organization called Mabuhay Health Center, where I found other cool Filipino pre-meds, medical students, and physicians thriving and serving the Filipino community in the South of Market District and the greater San Francisco region. He gave me tips on studying for the MCAT and getting letters of recommendation. Because of my dream to work with underserved communities, he helped me look into medical school programs with that focus, including prime programs like his. I had just met this guy, yet he never stopped supporting me. I asked myself, how did I get here? Despite an intimidating pre-medical environment, I felt that same familiar feeling throughout our interactions, which kept me pushing forward. As a result, I kept polishing and polishing my medical school application until I finally submitted. Have you ever looked into the mirror first thing in the morning, disheveled, and asked yourself, how did I get here? I know. Without a mirror, we wouldn't notice our hair sticking up, or crusty eyes, or drool. A mirror helps us fix the minor imperfections that come up naturally from time to time. It guides our hands to different parts of our face so we can scrub, wash, trim, and polish ourselves to look perfect. You might look at yourself in the mirror and ask, how did I get here? Well, what if I told you there was someone holding up that mirror in front of you? Someone who guided you with direction. Someone who helped you realize the best parts about yourself. Mentors are people who see you not only for who you are, but also for the person you could become. I wouldn't be where I am today without my mentors. Now take it one step further. What if I told you there wasn't just one person, but an entire community holding up that mirror for you? A community that sees you not only for who you are, but also for the person you could become. They consider you as part of their blood. Yet being connected by blood is more than just biology. It's about being connected by our heritage, our upbringing, our values, and our culture. They may or may not be biologically related to you. They may or may not know you that well. Yet that never stopped any of them from receiving you with open arms. I realized this familiar feeling was pakikisama that kept me grounded and stable throughout my journey in medicine. It was pakikisama, that bond connecting me with my college friends. It was pakikisama, that bond connecting me with the medical student. Because of pakikisama, I emerged not alone, but lifted high on the shoulders of giants. I ended up becoming accepted to Mabuhay Health Center as fundraising co-chair in 2014. And the following year, I went on to be accepted into UC Irvine School of Medicine in the Prime program for the Latino community, realizing my dream to become a physician working with underserved communities. I was overjoyed to find a home in FAME, which stands for Filipino Americans in Medicine, where I met other Filipino medical students and physicians, both at UC Irvine and at UCLA, where I did my master's degree. Over the past 5 years of my medical school training, I've had the privilege of working alongside FAME as well as inspiring pre-med student groups like Filipinos for Community Health, PCH at UCLA, and Filipino Pre-Health Undergraduate Student Organization, PUSO, at UC Irvine, and countless partner organizations to create safe spaces for growth and academic opportunity. And now, after our initial conversations almost 10 years ago, I had the privilege of reuniting with my friend and mentor, Dr. Antonio Moya, as well as his equally amazing friend, Dr. Angelico Razon, and work towards the creation of the Council of Young Filipino American Physicians, CYFAP, and this conference. Mentorship is such a strong foundation for this conference that it bleeds naturally. During a work meeting with ECO, what started as casual catching up naturally led to ECO giving me very helpful advice on preparing for my 4th-year pediatric infectious disease rotation that's coming up in 3 weeks. That alone was proof that what we are working towards in this conference and in this organization is very real and important to the rest of us. Looking back, I asked myself many times, how did I get here? It was through the help of others that helped me get to where I'm at, to become the best version of myself. Uh, Thank you guys for taking time to listen. And yeah, so now I'm going to before we open it up, because I know some people, they may or may not need to go, but let me just real quick take a picture of, there's so many of us, I'm going to try to take screenshots of this screenshot of like 1 of 2 and then 2 of 2. So just like turn on your video and then just like wave guys.